If you had a microscope and could look at a piece of a leaf, you would see thousands of tiny openings which branch out until the leaf has all of the materials it needs. What happens now?
Hello and welcome to this bonus lecture for Catch-Up Week. I want to say right away, yes, I know how you feel right now. I've been through a lot of education myself, and I know that in the middle of a class like this, you can get really overwhelmed. There's a lot of homework flying at you. There's a lot of information that you're trying to put in your brain, and there's just not that much time to do it all, right? So it's very easy to feel overwhelmed. So if that's the way you're feeling, this lecture is for you, okay? But I also want to say, yes, that I think you're really close to success, and much closer than you actually think. And this lecture is going to be my little talk about this, okay? So definitely check this out. I'm calling this The Hero's Journey, but actually I think it would be a better title to call it, Your Heroic Journey, okay? Because this is about you and what you're going through right now. Okay. So I have a couple of ideas that I want to throw at you. And the first one should be really familiar to you at this exact point, which is that learning is uncomfortable. And there's kind of no doubt about that. I don't know anybody that's like, oh, I love this, like while they're right in the middle of it, you know? Like I said, there's a lot of homework, there's a lot of things to learn, your brain is being stretched, and there's something kind of uncomfortable about that at a certain point, right? I mean, if you learn one thing, you're like, great. If you learn two things, you're like, okay, I can fit that in there. And once you start learning like 50 things and 60 things, it just gets a lot harder to find the room in there, and it starts getting uncomfortable, okay? Idea number two is the opposite side of that, though, okay? The opposite side of that is, once you have that knowledge, it's completely empowering and you love it, right? And just think, like, if you're in a situation where nobody else knows how to do something and you do, you're feeling sexy, right? If you know how to step in and save the day because of a piece of knowledge that you have stored in your brain that you got from a class or a book or whatever, you're saving the day. You're the hero. You're sexy, okay? So there's that idea. But now, here's my thesis about this, okay? And this might seem counterintuitive, or maybe you already have experienced this in your life, but the way I think about things is things that are uncomfortable now, in the present, are things that become quite memorable later, okay? I don't know if you agree with me or not, but if you've ever heard the phrase, comedy equals tragedy plus time, it's kind of the same thing. And if you've never heard this, let me just say that, like, let me give you an example of this, okay? So I'm a big bike rider, and I live in New York City. And a couple summers ago, I was riding home, and I was way up in Harlem, like several miles from where I live, and I had just had a great meal, and the sun was setting, and I was riding along the water, and it was just perfect. It was just, like, beautiful. And unfortunately, I was not really paying attention to the road surface very much, and I hit this gigantic pothole, okay? I went into this pothole with my front tire, and I was going fast and not paying attention, and I just got thrown right over my handlebars and landed right on my elbow, and I didn't know it at the time, but I broke my elbow, which was really painful. And I was all cut up, and I was lying there, and other bicyclists are, like, zooming past. Nobody's saying anything. I feel like a total fool. And finally, I jump back on my bike. Again, I don't know my elbow's broken. I'm like, I'll just ride the couple of miles home or whatever. And it was the worst. It was so painful. I can't tell you how much hell I was in, okay? Finally got home and I was like, I gotta go right to the hospital. Now, this story that I've just told you, at the time, when I was going through that, it was tragic. It seemed horrible. I was in excruciating pain. I felt embarrassed, and it was just a terrible time. But now, a couple of years later, as I'm telling the tale, it's kind of funny to me, right? Okay, like, it's one of those amusing anecdotes that everybody has where something horrible plus time turned into something that you kind of enjoy telling the story, and it's almost funny to you, okay? So this is the idea here, right? And, you know, like, just to reinforce, I really think that memorable / enjoyable equals discomfortable thing, or uncomfortable thing, I guess I should say, plus time, all right? And, you know, that will relate, and I will promise I will relate this back to this class and to learning in general, all right? So the way that I think about it is that learning is a 3-step process, and I want to take you through those 3 steps real quick. So the 3 stages of learning, I'm going to kind of divide up into a beginning, a middle, and an end, all right? And in the beginning step, here's how you feel. Excited, energized, you're ready to face challenges, everything's an opportunity, and maybe you're a little anxious, but you're generally optimistic, all right? And I assume this is how you felt when you first signed up for this class. And when, like in the first week, the orientation week, you're like, oh my goodness, this is going to solve something in my life, which I need, which is how to learn After Effects, right? And you're like psyched about it. And you wouldn't have signed up for the class, I don't think, if you weren't psyched about it, right? Now let's jump to the end for a second, skip the middle. At the end of this class, or at the end of any semester at college or any, class you've ever taken, basically, I think you're going to feel this way. Tired, you've gone through something hard, but you're kind of re-energized. You're ready to face challenges again, and again, everything feels like an opportunity because you have these new skills, and you're like, let me apply these, right? It's a generally optimistic time, or at least this is how I think about things, right? Maybe you're different, but I think most people, have the beginning and end kind of like this, right? Let's look at the middle for 1 second. In the middle, you feel the opposite. You feel stressed, overwhelmed. Whereas you were ready for challenges, now everything feels like a challenge, okay? Whereas everything, everything felt like an opportunity before, now everything feels scary, you want to run away or hide, you just want to blow it off, right? On some level, okay? And this is very human. And you can't really see the light of the tunnel because you're right in the middle, okay? And I would say, like, everybody feels this way. It's not just you, okay? I feel this way when I take classes. Even teaching this class, in some sense, I feel this way right now too, okay? But I want to say about this middle period of time, because this is critically important. The middle is when you're really learning everything. That's when it's happening. That's when you're getting the work done. And ironically, okay, this again goes back to my theories about uncomfortableness. Once this class is done, you'll think of this as the best part of the class. I swear, okay? And this is called the paradox of memory. And, to jump back into this idea of uncomfortability for 1 second, I want to say that, like I like scary movies, and I like roller coasters, okay? And both of those things have something in common, which I think is very related to this, okay? Which is that during the roller coaster ride, I'm not happy. I am terrified, okay? I'm upset with myself for getting on that darn thing, okay? Similarly, when I watch a scary movie, I'm very sympathetic to the main character, so I'm like, oh, don't go down into that basement, or why did you open that door, or oh, don't make that choice, right? You feel uncomfortable, and it's awkward. It's a horrible feeling, and it's a terrible feeling, right? But after you get off the roller coaster, or when the scary movie's over, you're like, that was really interesting, right? I had a really good time, okay? This is the paradox of memory that I'm talking about here. There's lots of paradoxes of memory, but that's the specific one I'm talking about. That, like, we look in the past through kind of rose-colored glasses, all right, if you will? So let's talk for a second about storytelling and mythology, which might seem like kind of an about face on this topic, but I think it's actually really all very related. There's a guy who in 1949, and he's a brilliant scholar, and he wrote a book called Hero with a Thousand Faces. You've probably heard of this guy, Joseph Campbell. He was interviewed by Bill Moyers in the late 80s, and they wrote a book about it called The Power of Myth, or The Hero's Journey. I think it's called The Hero's Journey, actually, right? Anyway, Joseph Campbell came up with this idea of the monomyth, okay? He basically combed through all the world's ancient stories from every culture. And he kind of came up with this idea that there's essentially one myth. There's one story that we tell ourselves over and over again, okay? And that story is, in the Odyssey, and it's in King Arthur, and it's in, like, every culture has this same story, right? And basically, he called this the hero's journey. And here is the structure of that journey, right? We start at 12 o'clock, and we kind of are going down this way, right? And we get to the ordinary world. This is the ordinary world that the hero inhabits in their normal life. So everything's normal. Then 2, there's a call to adventure. The hero starts to get involved. But 3, the hero's reluctant and they kind of refuse. 4, they meet a wise old mentor. Okay, in this case, that's me. And then they cross the threshold from what he's calling the ordinary world into the special world of adventure, okay? And then number 6, he's tested, there's allies. I should say he or she, I apologize. Then number 7, the approach, like, to the castle or whatever. 8, okay, is the very bottom of this. It's 6 o'clock. It's the acme, the nadir, that's the fancy word I'm looking for, okay? And that is the hero faces death and maybe is reborn in some sense because of that battle, all right? And now they're on their way up again. They get their reward. They seize the sword, okay? They're on the road back home. Then there's a resurrection thing. They're reborn, okay? And then finally they return home with what he calls the elixir, which is like the thing that saves the village, right? Okay, so that's the basic story. That's in almost every story and in every myth throughout human existence, all right? And, even before Joseph Campbell came up with this, there was this guy named Aristotle, okay? He lived, I think, about 385 BC, something like that. And he was a really smart guy, to put it mildly. He was taught by Plato, and then he in turn became the teacher of Alexander the Great. And he's kind of like, a historically smart badass kind of person who, wrote ethics and philosophy and drama and came up with ideas about math and physics and was like a total genius, the like of which the world has never seen before. Okay. And also, like I said, he wrote about the structure of drama. And let's see what he says about this. Okay. So this is known as the Aristotelian arc. And Aristotle basically looked at all the plays, and playwriting was a huge thing in ancient Greece. It was sort of like their Netflix. Okay. And he looked at all the plays and he basically summed up the structure of all plays into this 3-act structure, okay? Which is Act 1, there's exposition, which just means that the story's starting and the hero gets involved. And then there's rising action, things complicate, everything gets harder and harder and harder until it reaches this peak, which is the big crisis of the story. And then after that, quickly we get to the resolution, okay? This is the Aristotelian arc. Now, people in Hollywood and on TV and stuff have taken this structure and turned it into what's known in modern days as the 3-act structure, okay? It's basically the same. It's really basically the same, okay? It's got an arrow that goes like this now instead of like that and then down, right? But what this means, I guess, is the higher the arrow is sort of like the better the hero is doing, and the lower the arrow is, the worse the hero is doing. So you can kind of see in this structure here that the hero starts off kind of in the middle, things get a little bit better, then they get way worse, and then they get way better, okay? And that's the 3-act structure. But let's break this down a little bit more and just talk about this in greater detail, okay? So at the beginning of Act 1, the journey begins. There's a call to action. The hero hears about something that they have to do, right? And they get charged up about it, and they're ready to go. Then they assemble a team. And then when we reach this peak right here, which is sort of the first act, second act break, things are looking really good for the hero. Early successes, they've got their team, they're fired up, okay? Then, as we get through all of Act 2, things go to shit, okay? Something bad happens, the hero's tested, the hero faces failure, and then at the very bottom of that peak there, all seems lost. And this is what's known as the second act, third act break. And when you're at the end of the second act, the hero's at their lowest point, all right? And this might be maybe where you're at now, okay? So keep that in mind. And then I want to talk about Act 3, which is the shortest section, so definitely think about that. And then at the last minute, right, the hero rallies, gets some help from a friend, kills the monster, and saves the day and goes home, okay? And that happens really, really quickly in this structure, all right? And I want to give an example, just in case that's too abstract, from one of my very favorite movies, and I'm hoping it's a story that we all know pretty well, which is Star Wars, the original Star Wars, not any of the sequels, prequels, or anything else that George Lucas tried to cram into the universe, except for Rogue One, which was pretty darn good. All right. So in Star Wars, Act 1, basically, Luke decides to go with Obi-Wan to learn the Force and rescue the princess, right? And, bad shit happens, his uncle and aunt die or whatever. But then, quickly speaking, he gets to the peak and he rescues the princess. That doesn't happen at the end of the movie. That happens in the first third of the movie, okay? And then the rest of the middle of Star Wars, things are getting harder and harder for Luke. Harder and harder, okay? And then finally, at the very bottom, Darth Vader kills Obi-Wan right in front of Luke, right? And this is horrible. He's now lost his mentor, he's lost his father figure, and all seems lost for Luke, right? And then 5 seconds later, he blows up the Death Star and gets a medal, and the movie's over, okay? He saves the day, right? So, I just need to point out to you that Luke would not have destroyed the Death Star if Obi-Wan had not been killed. Okay, and to put that another way, Luke won because he was tested and he kept going. He faced death and he kept going. He shouldered on even at the worst point. Okay, you see where this is going now, I think. And where it's going is this thought, all right? When things are at their hardest, when they feel the worst to you, you're actually one small step away from winning, right? And to say it a different way, you really don't know how close you are to success right now, okay? So if you're feeling overwhelmed right now because of this class, I promise, if you just push a little bit harder and take a break on catch-up week, and it doesn't mean you have to like stay up every night till 6 a.m. and work so hard, but just keep going and keep making progress here. And I promise you, you will blow up that Death Star, okay? You will learn basic After Effects. I mean, the fact is that most of you already have, you know? Almost everybody has made insanely tremendous success already in this process. You've gone from 0 to 1, which is way harder than going from 1 to 10. And just so you know, 0 to 1, from knowing nothing to knowing something, is the very hardest kind of learning, all right? So keep going, everybody, because you're almost there, I promise. And I'm really proud of how much you're learning and how much work you're doing. And I just want you to know how inspirational that is for me too. And I just want you to know you're really, really, really close to success. Thank you so much, and keep going.
If you had a microscope and could look at a piece of a leaf, you would see thousands of tiny openings which branch out until the leaf has all of the materials it needs. What happens now?